So a warm welcome today to Richard Byworth. He's the head of Diginex Global. It's one of the leading blockchain companies in Asia. Super grateful to have him here today. Also launched the first crypto exchange traded on NASDAQ. Looking forward to his insights and thoughts, his background in terms of where he started, why he's excited or passionate about the space, and his visions and dream for the future of the industry. Thank you. To you, Richard.
Sure, thanks, Michael. And hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here speaking to you guys and understanding the values of your community and what you're looking for. I think this is a really noble endeavor. And really, it's the right way to think about education. I've got young kids, and I get very frustrated with the model of traditional education and how it's totally unprepared in terms of the way it's structured for what the real world is like today. Things are moving so fast that curriculums, of course, have not kept up. So I think, Michael, what you and Tidip have been doing is a really noble endeavor, and it's the right thing. So maybe I'll just start with my background a little bit, where I came from and what we set out to build here at Diginex, a little bit of the journey and where we see the future going. And I think someone asked about the disruption effects that blockchain would have on things like custody and other elements of the financial services side of the business. So quickly about myself, I was an investment banker for 18 years. I started my career as a trader in London. I grew up watching movies like Wall Street and wanting to get involved in that industry. Greed is good was a philosophy that a lot of young Wall Street bankers grew up on. And obviously, as you grow older and you kind of, the culture shifts, you get to a point where you start to realize that actually the world that we'd built things on was not necessarily the right thing. And with crypto and what we do here today, you're able to actually position things very differently. And I think allow everybody to be part of the future of finance. And I think it's super exciting. So as I say, I was an 18-year investment banker. I started in trading, moved into sales. I worked in London, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. I'm still in Hong Kong 11 years after moving here from Tokyo. I worked in a Japanese investment bank for the majority of my career. Japanese culture in finance is a very interesting place to be in terms of sort of the way it's very different to the way that Western big investment banks work. And we ended up in 2008 acquiring Lehman Brothers, the bank that I'm sure you have all heard of that went under in the crisis. And Lehman was probably the most cowboy investment bank on Wall Street at the time. And combining that culture with the Japanese culture was something that I will be able to write 20 books about when I'm sitting in Bali alongside Michael. It was a very interesting place. But look, I started getting interested in crypto in early 2017. I read the book Sapiens, which is it's a book about society, how human evolution has changed the way that we operate, how society operates. And it really started to get me questioning a lot about the world, around my own belief systems, around the way that, you know, things were working in the real world. And one of the things that the author, Yuval Harari, kept going on about was Bitcoin. And where he was talking about Bitcoin in conjunction with the value system of money. And I really couldn't understand why he was talking about something that I'd heard about in 2009 and dismissed as some scam on the internet. And so I ended up looking into it in a bit more detail, and it just blew my mind. And how this could potentially completely change the world. And, putting digital cash into everybody's pocket without involvement of banks, governments, etc. So I started looking at the space from an investment standpoint, which is generally how I was always looking at the world, and started to invest directly in crypto. But then one of my friends started this company, Diginex, which was a cryptocurrency mining company. And I invested in that. And then I actually got to the point where I realized that banking was over for me. So I left banking in 2017. And I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do. I was thinking about moving into venture cap. I had an offer from a venture capital firm, but I was going to take my time and make my decision. And while I was sort of sitting on the beach, as we call it, I got contacted by the founder of Diginex. And he said, I would really appreciate it if you could come and help me build this thing. And I said, what are you talking about? You're running a bunch of machines out of facilities in cold parts of the world. I don't really have much interest in that. And I don't think I'd be very good at it either. And he said, well, no, I actually see a huge future in digital finance, which was obviously the point that I'd already got to with crypto. And he said, I really think we can build something special, bringing sort of the security law values around protecting investors, because he said no one's protecting investors in this space right now. There's scams and crooks all over the place. He said he told me about all these platforms in Hong Kong that were manipulating markets to effectively make sure their clients got liquidated so that they could make even more money. So it was actually the worst of banking that we'd seen being brought into this new asset class that actually really should be trying to change the world and actually help improve people's lives. And so we came at it very much from the angle of, okay, how do we think about what regulation should look like? Because regulation didn't exist in the majority of the services that we wanted to provide. And so we really came at it from a perspective of trying to structure our business as, that full services that you would need to effectively become the one-stop shop for everything to do with your crypto. So to give you an example, you're an owner of Bitcoin. You want to make sure that that Bitcoin is safely stored. You may want to use that Bitcoin as collateral, meaning put Bitcoin in a deposit book or account effectively and borrow money against it, or earn money on it by depositing it there, or write derivatives around it so that you can really increase your capital base and really essentially provide the freedom for everybody, not just institutions, to be able to participate in this asset class and have all the benefits that we're used to seeing in traditional finance of really being able to make money with money. And I think that what the nice thing about crypto is, it allows you to really reduce the unit size and therefore allow you to really offer those services to a much broader base of people. So that's really what we set out to do. We built our own exchange called Equos. So Equos is really trying to focus on the equitable side of things, being fair and transparent to our clients, allowing people to operate on a platform that they can trust. We often get asked the question, why did you list the company on NASDAQ? Well, it's all about that trust element, right? I don't know how many people here are aware of what happened in China recently with one of the big exchanges over there. The CEO got arrested and no one could get their Bitcoin off the platform because they had no governance structure. They had no proper oversight of who was controlling the keys in the event that something happened to the CEO, and suddenly all these people's assets were put at risk. And when you're operating to a NASDAQ level of governance, you have standards and protocols and policies in place for all these sorts of things, again, to protect people, to make sure their assets are safe and work in a fair and transparent way that you can hold up to a regulator like NASDAQ, who, by the way, are a regulator, and go through that approval process that we went through to get listed on NASDAQ with the SEC. Another core part of our business is around custody. And I think it was Christian, who asked the question around custody and how we think that blockchain will start to change things. I think that what's interesting about custody is there's always this divide. Like, is it you looking after your own keys, or is it you effectively providing someone else with those keys and trusting them as a third party? And, obviously the position we're coming from is providing a very secure solution. Our solution was built by the ex-head of security solutions at the Ministry of Defence in the UK, alongside the guy that built UBS's infrastructure banking for them out of the UK in the last 5 years. So a very competent team around security of custody and overall security processes, protocols, and to a level of government security. We've obviously built something that is a third-party custodian. And, myself personally, I'm married, I have kids. I want to make sure that if something happens to me, that my crypto is in a safe place and my wife is not worrying how she's going to be getting access to my Bitcoin, or if someone comes to my house with a machine gun that they can't get access to my crypto, right? These are all things that are real world issues that we've seen in previous bull runs. And so I have a very clear segregated effect. I can't actually even access my crypto. It's in our DigiVault solution. And if something happens to me, then there's a process around which my family or my estate owners can get access to those keys. So it's an interesting and different approach. And I admire the people that can custody their own crypto. It scares the crap out of me, if I can speak openly. It's a frightening thing to be a holder of a bearer asset. You need to really think about what comes with that. So we've got a custodian exchange. We've got our own asset manager to take advantage of what we see as the real inefficiencies in crypto. We're obviously not the only exchange out there. There's about 250 different exchanges. So you've got platforms across the world with different fiat currency crosses, 8,600 different cryptocurrencies. There's all sorts of different inefficiencies in those markets, which actually present what we call in finance alpha, which is effectively free money lying around. What I mean by free money is you may have a buyer of Coinbase at 8,600 who can't see a seller on Binance at 8,500, let's just say, as an example. If I can get access to both those platforms, I can take the free money of $100 risk-free and walk away. And so what we do is we invest in managers that have different strategies around that sort of space. We call them alpha-centric strategies or market-neutral strategies to target that free money. And so the fund targets around a 15 to 25% annual return. In the last 12 months, it's returned about 38%. I know these don't sound huge returns in the context of crypto, but in the context of traditional management and market neutral returns, these are massive. And from the risk that's being put on the table, it's very, very minimal. These strategies make money in down markets, up markets, all the same. So it's a strategy that people are really drawn to. I can talk about other parts of the business which are non-core, but I think there's one part of the business that I'd like to speak to this group about, particularly. It's our capital markets business. And this is where we disrupt entirely all of investment banking. This is, to Christian's question, how blockchain starts to really disrupt traditional finance. So today, and we've experienced this being a NASDAQ listed company, you have all manner of inefficiencies built into the traditional equity markets. And what we saw about GameStop and the way that that happened with Robinhood coming in, effectively closing down buy orders for that, that was a function of poor infrastructure that we have around the markets and the way that they, because they don't have direct settlement like we do with blockchain, you end up having to post collateral, and the margin requirements were blowing out of all proportion for Robinhood with the amount of risk that they were taking. And so they needed to post so much money, they didn't have it. So they had to shut down further buy orders in GameStop. Now, that's an inefficiency that blockchain solves instantaneously, because you can settle immediately. You can only buy with something, it's direct, what do we call it? Delivery versus payment, effectively. So you're transferring one asset for another asset, be that US dollar for that GameStop shares, or Bitcoin for ETH, or whatever it might be, but you've got that immediate transaction settlement. And so this is the thing that blockchain will totally change. What we're doing with that capital markets business is actually building an investment bank on top of blockchain. We've started with securitization. So securitization, what I mean by that is, let's take this very nice villa that Michael's sitting in Bali. Michael owns that villa. He really likes it. He doesn't want to sell it, but he wants to monetize it in some regard. So he could securitize it. And the way that he would securitize it in normal markets is go and apply for a mortgage. But actually in fair and equal securitization markets, you're not just restricted to the bank that will write you a mortgage. You could go to all manner of people and crowdsource financing for Michael to go and buy a Ferrari so that he can drive around and look cool in Bali or whatever it might be, as an idea to effectively securitize that asset. So that's what we do. We do securitization of hard assets, also of private equity. There's a big market in secondary private equity that we're involved with in both the LP level and direct investments. So this is, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about, for example, an investment in SpaceX, being able to offer people that in digital form and being able to get access to that. That's something that we want to be able to bring to the masses, because right now, again, if you want to invest in SpaceX, probably one of the most exciting companies in private equity, you've got to have a minimum $250,000 investment. You're going to get ripped off by the broker that gives it to you. You're going to pay well above last NAV. You're going to pay huge fees, and you're going to get hit with performance fees as well on that structure too. So what we're trying to do, again, is call it, for want of a better word, democratization of finance, but it's really, it's opening the door, which, you know, everybody's heard that phraseology before around crypto, but I really think that here we're in a position to be able to do that. We have the rails to be able to offer that in the future with the exchange, with the custodian. So you'll be able to eventually buy clips of SpaceX in token form on our exchange, store them in our custodian, or even use them as a collateral base to then borrow dollars or whatever it might be. So really very excited about what this industry has to offer. I don't know if I've spoken for an appropriate amount of time, Michael, but I think it's probably a good moment for me to stop there and see if there are any questions available.
Amazing. I guess like super amazing, like to hear you speak, Rich, and thank you so much. Like one question, experience as in the investment banking world and the traditional finance world, like how have you found this entire industry of digital assets and digital tokens compare with that? Like what kind of differences or what kind of things do you think this industry needs to evolve to become one where it's much more mature and like representative and acknowledged by the rest of the industries and world?
Yeah, I think, you know, what I often hear from this industry is we don't want regulation, or we don't want regulators getting involved in what we're trying to do. And I think that kind of misses the boat somewhat, misses the big picture somewhat. I think that what regulation allows is for protections. Now, regulations need to be sensible. So we've actually put ourselves in a position where we advise regulators. We help them see how this space needs to be regulated to protect the little guy. And I think that sensible engagement with regulation is the right way to go. And I think that more of the industry needs to just be open to that. I think that there's no way that we're getting away from it. Regulators will regulate. That's what they do. And so, you know, when we're still living in a world where we have to interact with the banking system. We still are at the whim of regulators. And so I think it's really important that we're open to that, as much as, you know, we're always asking regulators to be open with us. I think is really important. So I'd say that's one piece of advice that I would
agrees
want to
on your answer on regulation.
Sorry.
No, I was saying Philip completely agrees. I was just about to say to share the question from Miguel. What would what would it take for crypto to see? Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. I think that we are, the way that I frame it, when I'm trying to convince somebody that they need to own Bitcoin, one of the biggest steps that you can get them to make is to think about their Bitcoin in units of Bitcoin as opposed to dollars, right? Once you get people to shift from that denomination factor, I think that goes a big way to completely advancing the way that they think about this. It's almost like a seismic shift in their brain. And I think that that's the point where we're going to see a much broader adoption of crypto. I mean, it's going to be around Bitcoin, I think, because, you know, Bitcoin is that, you know, it's the beast that is going to devour and dominate all. I think we're going to see many Ethereum imitators, and that's fine. I think that, you know, the different flexibility that some of these different protocols give is great. But I think once we get to a point where more and more of the world understand Bitcoin in that way of thinking about it, then I think that will really be the flipping of the horse and the cart. I would say that you know, crypto as a word is kind of sometimes misleading. I think that blockchain will underlie a lot of what we do around transactions, and that will be, again, hugely progressive because it will cut a lot of fees for people that are interacting with investment products as a starting point. It will really reduce the amount of costs that the average investor is exposed to. So I think that blockchain itself will, as we're doing with our capital markets business, start to shift the rails of capital markets broadly to that delivery mechanism, as opposed to the massive inefficiency that we see in the traditional space. So I would say it's a little bit of both those channels moving towards broader adoption.
Amazing. A question here from Yip. I'd love to hear more about how you see the role of crypto exchanges in the economy of the future.
Yeah, I mean, crypto exchanges are a little bit of it's a kind of an interesting thing. These things aren't exchanges, they're exchanges plus broker dealers, right? So you're effectively, in a traditional world, you can't onboard directly to an exchange. You have to go through a broker dealer like Robinhood, Interactive Brokers, whoever it might be, and then those brokers have access to the exchange via a seat process or some other way of connection, and they get you access to that liquidity pool. So already crypto is a little bit different, and it's sort of shaped the way that this industry is going to go. Like, you can get direct access, which is why it's always been a retail-led phenomenon. I think that, you know, certainly the way we're positioning Equos is that we want it to go even further than that. So effectively, it becomes your one-stop shop, as I mentioned before. You've got your borrowing, your lending, your derivatives, your execution platform for best execution. All of those things integrated together, allowing you to effectively get the best out of this asset class. And I think that's the way it's going to evolve. I think if exchanges just exist as just pure exchanges, they will fall by the sidelines, because everybody wants to have all of these wonderful things that you can do with crypto, and create your own private bank. Effectively, this is what crypto is. It's your private bank account. And, you know, we effectively facilitate all those other things around that. And so I think that that's the way that any sensible exchange should be moving.
Amazing. And I guess going back to what you shared earlier, like, initially, as most people in the world are, like, they looked at Bitcoin in terms of seeing it like a bit of a scam or a bit of skepticism. Like, what was the moment when you're like, there really is something here, or, should really explore it? And then when the tipping point, you're like, this is, something that can really change the world or do lots of good. And
it was really reading that book for me in 2017. It really that book already was changing the way that I thought about models of belief systems in society. And yeah, Bitcoin is just a very, I mean, I don't know, my journey down the Bitcoin rabbit hole took a very long time. And those realization moments keep coming. One of the most recent being that I believe that Bitcoin could eat a massive portion of the value out of the real estate market. And the reason I believe that is because if you look around and a lot of the investors that I interact with, the big pools of their capital get allocated to real estate. Real estate is a pain in the ass to deal with, excuse my French, but it's a real pain to deal with. Like, you've got tenants, you've got upkeep, you've got facility maintenance, you've got all the utilities that go with that. And, often you have to pay a management company just to help you deal with a piece of real estate. So what happens when those big allocators of capital start to see what they can do with Bitcoin or other crypto assets around generating value? And obviously, as Bitcoin gets more broadly adopted, the volatility is going to diminish. And so more and more of those investors will become attracted to it. And this is, again, part of the amazing power of Bitcoin, is as the price goes up, it becomes more legitimate, which is why, we obviously saw something like Elon Musk's move. That when it depasses the market cap of gold, then you're going to get to a point where everybody allocating to real estate is going to be going, hang on a minute, why am I wasting, my capital allocation? And as more and more people do that, they're going to start pushing. Real estate's going to underperform. Bitcoin's going to continue to perform. It will just be self-perpetuating. So I see Bitcoin eventually taking a massive part of the real estate market as well.
amazing. We have a question here from Yanis. How do you feel about regulatory issues when tokenizing assets or investments?
So tokenizing assets investments, frankly, these are securities. The majority of the time they're securities, and they should be treated as securities. And I think that, obviously there are different ways to deal with those securities because you've got a far better transmission mechanism. But at the end of the day, they're securities. What's interesting is when you move into these sort of slightly unclear areas where, I don't know, someone decides to tokenize themselves. As we started to see with athletes and sports stars, talking about this sort of thing. How on earth do you think about that? And certainly doesn't fit into securities law. So I think securities are easy, whereas everything else that this technology can do is just going to completely break the way that we think about things. And regulators have got their work cut out, which again, for us, people involved in the industry, we need to really embrace the regulators, show them the way in, show them that they can trust us, and effectively help them think through what is going to be very important for us in the next few years is the way that they define that regulation.
Amazing. A question here from Yip. Would love to hear about your entrepreneurial leadership journey. What was your happiest moment?
I know what my happiest moment was. We definitely for a very long time, we were going through crypto winter as we were building this company. It was very hard to raise capital. It wasn't pleasant, I can tell you. I spent my whole life raising capital, speaking to investors, and it was a struggle. When we became NASDAQ listed, these things are very different. We raised $40 million recently in a capital raise. it took me less than a week. And prior, it would have taken me a year and a half to maybe 2 to raise that sort of money. So the day we raised that capital, I suddenly realized things had changed and I could focus very much on what I was here to do, and that's build the business. The entrepreneurial journey, I mean, like, I've always been very entrepreneurially minded. I've built businesses within the bank. I've built businesses prior to joining the bank. And, you know, at Diginex, it was actually, you know, something that I, you know, felt that I was absolutely cut out for. I mean, I'd come from banking. I'd seen what that looked like, seen the mistakes that I felt had been made with that, and saw the way that this industry could go. So yeah, it was very enjoyable. But the happiest moment was in January when that $40 million check came in.
Amazing. And what kept you going like through this journey, like in terms of the times when, you know, like you had difficulties or issues or people who didn't believe in you, like what kept you, you know, persevering and like finally achieved like this huge success? And
Yeah, look, I mean, it was definitely very hard at certain points. There was a moment a little while ago now where I had 1 hour before I was presenting to the whole company about whether or not we were continuing or whether or not we were closing the company down. And yeah, we've been aggressively raising capital into that moment to see if we could keep the lights on. Probably the most stressful period of my life. But fortunately, I managed to walk out there an hour later and tell everyone the company was going to survive. So yeah, that was cool. Yeah, it was. There are definitely very, very hard moments. I remember reading a tweet early on in my life at Diginex. It was about, you know, being a startup entrepreneur. It's like one day you wake up in the morning, you're like, everything's amazing, we're going to win, we're going to crush everything. And you wake up the next day and you're like, I don't know what's going to happen, we're going to die, this is all over, the company's finished. And literally nothing's changed, but it's just this huge roller coaster of emotion with what you're looking at in terms of the business and having inputs around it. And, you know, things can go wrong fast. So yeah, there are low moments, but you just got to keep your head up. And the thing that always kept me going was working alongside the founder, who just was like, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. Even when it looked like we were dead, completely gone. He would say that, and that ended up really ingraining itself in me. And he left the business some time ago. But, you know, that's what's kept me going, is that spirit. You've just never give up, never say die. If you never say die, you won't die.
amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that. And in terms of like your vision or dream for the future, both I guess personally and for your project, like what would you like it to be in like 5 years or 10 years and beyond?
Yeah, look, in 5 years' time, we
Yeah,
really want to be front and center of this industry. We want to be the guys that, you know, everybody's turning to and saying, these are the guys I trust. These are the guys that I want to park my assets with, that I feel comfortable with, that I have that security with. You know, we charge one of the lowest fee sets out of every platform on the street. That's not because we're making loads of money, and the scale that we have now is anyway profitable. It's more about, those are the right fees to be charging people for this. You don't need to be a Coinbase and charging people 1.5%. It's ridiculous. So we charge everybody the same fees that we charge institutional investors. We think that it's the right way. And we believe that if you come from a position of doing the right thing, then eventually your client base tends to love you. And, you know, that's the most important thing. That was what Jeff Bezos was focused on, was client experience, right? And that's the ultimate thing. If you can make your client happy, your clients will always be happy. Sorry, go on.
Question here. Have you seen institutional investors interested in DeFi for yield? Or is it Bitcoin for store of value and inflation hedge?
Sorry, I lost you for a second there, Michael. Can you repeat that? Or
No
maybe.
worries. Have you seen institutional interested in DeFi, decentralized finance for yield? or is it all Bitcoin for store of value and inflation hedge?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, so some institutions are trying to understand what this is. Obviously, it's hugely disruptive. I think that we're a little bit early in its development and maturity for institutions at this point. A lot of, to the person that asked the question, a lot of the institutional interest is around understanding Bitcoin now. A few of them are starting to understand Ethereum and obviously what it powers. And so they're starting to look at that as an asset as well. But yeah, I think DeFi in its current form is potentially a stretch too far. I think that it depends how you present DeFi as well. I mean, the DeFi and CeFi kind of sometimes they blend a little bit too. You know, Celsius presents itself as a decentralized finance platform, whereas clearly a centralized finance platform. But I think their service is exceptional. So yeah, look, those are the sorts of things that are starting to get institutional interest. So players like ourselves, players like Celsius and others that have built, you know, very solid businesses. The thing that all institutional investors struggle with is reputational risk. So if you speak to BlackRock about whether or not they're going to make an investment, the first thing that they will ask themselves is this going to cause us reputational risk or headline risk in a newspaper that if it comes out, we lose assets, right? You know, BlackRock's operating, what is it, $9 trillion of assets now? They operate for the US government in terms of some of their bond funds. So that's how institutional investors think. It's about removing my risk in terms of reputational risk. And DeFi at this moment comes with the element of reputational risk, right?
Amazing. And I love to hear, like, what's one piece of learning or advice that's helped you throughout your journey, like personally or like as a business, or like through the like your wealth of experience? Like,
I would say it's that advice from my effective co-founder. It was, you know, when he would remain extremely calm when things were blowing up all over the place. And I think that's the key. If you want to be running a startup, things are going to go wrong. You just need to have a very calm head and just say, okay, you can see the situation. Don't over dramatize everything. Like, there's no point getting emotional about these things. Just be clear, logical in your thinking around how do I work through this problem. And eventually, you know, we're all smart people involved in this program. I think you'll work it out. You'll get to the point of, okay, if I don't panic, these are the moves I make. And that eventually puts you in very good stead to protect yourself and your business.
amazing. We have a question here. What's the skills needed to thrive in the future? What would you want your kids to learn more in school?
Yeah, one thing that I really get upset by is if someone chooses to be an artist or they choose to be, you know, an engineer, they don't have any understanding of finance. And I think this is cruel, actually, because, you know, I have many friends that I've actually got to the point of saying, look, let me help you invest your money because you're being screwed by this private bank or you're being screwed by this investment advisor. The majority of these people have no idea how to invest capital, but they just have, I'm an investment advisor, financial advisor, whatever it might be. It's bullshit. And it's really bad because it just takes money off people and they lose, or they don't make money. They generally lose money. So I think that in all schools, finance should be taught. You need to be able to invest your capital, certainly while we're still operating within a fiat currency system, while you're always trying to protect against inflation. You need to know how to allocate your capital. And I think it's really not right that schools don't include some level of financial education, be it through to basic economics or basic fundamental valuation metrics for a company, or what is a reasonable risk expectation too many smart people I know have made investments in something because they've been attracted by, oh, this will return 100% in 2 years. Well, that should be a red flag, right? That is a red flag to anyone that's worked in finance for a long period of time. So I think that a lot of people get stung by this, and I really, it upsets me actually. So I think that finance would be the most important thing. But I'm a big fan of Ken Robinson. I'm sure, Michael, you've studied him a lot. I think that his focus of just saying everybody's an individual and everybody should have their sort of education tailored to them, I think is a beautiful way of thinking about education. And our school curriculums are way too structured to pigeon boxes, trying to pigeonhole your children. I think it's a real shame. And, you get a lot of these conditions like dyslexia or ADHD. These are all made up conditions. You just have a kid that's got a different way of learning. I think that just our educators should probably be some of our best paid people. Instead, they're some of our worst paid people. That just tells you what you're going to get. In finance, we have an expression: you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And I think this is unfortunately what we end up with. We've got an education structure and system, and I think it's broadly global, that unfortunately teachers are massively underpaid. So where does the talent go? Talent, unless they love teaching to such a degree that they're just so impassioned by it and they can afford to live on a teacher's salary, that they're going to go and do that. But what you really want is the most talented people like, Michael and Thedip coming out and creating educational structures for people and kids. And that's the future. That's the solution.
Thanks so much, Richard. A question from Anne. Do you have any personal daily habits to set you up for the day, to clear your mind, help you make better decisions as a leader, and help you de-stress?
There's so much I wish I did better. I know that meditation is super effective for me. Exercise is super effective for me. The only one thing that I do that is super effective for me is sleep 8 hours. I'm religious about it. I will just cancel meetings. If I've gone to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, sorry, everything's canceled till 10. I'm not getting up. I'm sleeping 8 hours. Because if I don't, I am useless. Absolutely useless. It may be just I'm a bit old and my brain's starting to petrify, but I can't function if I don't have 8 hours of sleep. I need my 8 hours sleep. Yeah.
Awesome. Question from Christian. How do you explain to people with financially illiterate people these concepts so that you can get their time and trust how do you get their time and trust invest?
I think I understand the question.
Yeah. All right. Maybe you could repeat.
Yeah, sure. So I think the question is, how do you get people to understand what it is that you're talking about to the degree that they trust you, to be able to, get them to the point to actually work with you? To be very clear, I don't do this as a business. This is not a service that I broadly provide for people. It's more when I have a friend that I see is struggling, who has been ripped off by a financial advisor, then I'll just step in and help them. And, now I'm always telling people, make sure Bitcoin's part of your allocation, because I do believe that this is going to continue to just go higher and higher. As I've said, I think it eventually eats a lot of the investment product industry. I think, I'm very passionate about finance and investing. It's something that I've always loved. And it was something that I, effectively self-taught. I studied French at university, but I just became super excited in investing when I was young. When I was a kid, we had interest rates that were interesting. And so I'd save my pocket money and I'd go down the bank, and every month I'd make a deposit and I'd see how much my money had grown because I was earning 12% interest on that. And that really inspired me to say, oh, wow, you can make money with money. And that was for me a real step towards that. And I guess a lot of people didn't get as passionate about it as I did at an early age. So yeah, I think I just spend a lot of time, working with people and just saying, look, I'm not telling you this is what you should do, but this is how I'd allocate your capital. And, when they struggle to do that, then I can help them do it. But I'm not taking any fees on this or anything. It's more people that more and more people are starting to approach me because they've heard that I've helped other people in their industry or whatever. And just, yeah, I mean, crypto is obviously something that a lot of people don't understand. I think everybody here, they understand the value proposition. I'm always surprised at how few people have really got their head around it, and they still, read whatever they hear in the media rather than actually understanding the subject. So I think, again, what you're doing, Michael, and TDIP is very, very useful.
Amazing. And what makes you so excited or passionate about this, like Bitcoin token digitization industry or shift in the economy? Like, what is the thing that makes you feel like this is so much potential, to impact the world in a positive way and solve meaningful problems?
Yeah, look, what I like about Bitcoin is we're still early. We're still very, very early. Everybody can participate. I become pretty much a preacher about the whole thing. And I think that the thing that gets me excited is what impact it's going to have on the world. Like, you look at Nigeria, right? Nigeria is a country that is effectively punishing their citizens through poorly implemented central bank policy. And, now they're talking about banning crypto. And I think in the Senate, they said the other day that Bitcoin was responsible for the devaluation of the Naira. It's like, well, no, the people responsible for that were the central bank, but obviously that's a convenient narrative for your people. But I think, what I think is exciting about it, the thing that gets me passionate about it, is how it's going to change the world. How the world is going to look when you cut out all of these middlemen that add zero value to the financial markets. And I think someone asked a question earlier about what I see as being the big difference with crypto and finance. Crypto is generally populated with people that are passionate about crypto. Finance is not populated with people that are passionate about finance. It's populated with people that are there to make money, right? And that doesn't necessarily create the best outcomes. It's really, it creates people that are very political, that try to protect their turf, that don't always do the right thing, that they're, that's what I became very tired of, was people that weren't there for the cause and the way that we could, be helpful to society. And I think that what's interesting about crypto is actually the community, the people that are really so passionate about it, because it is going to change the world. And it's just exciting to be here to see about how that change is going to come about.
Amazing. And for those people who are like a bit skeptical, or like they don't really get it, or you've tried to explain it to them over the years and they still kind of can't get their head around it, like what have you found to be the most like successful way to kind of explain to them or get them to say, okay, I kind of get, like you're really doing something that can really help people in Nigeria or people in villages in India or in Indonesia, and really help support the inequity piece that you mentioned?
People generally aren't unconvinced by that. They do kind of get that, and they see how it could be useful in these societies. A lot of people just don't understand why they should invest in Bitcoin. And I think, I'm often coming at it, just say, buy Bitcoin for your kids, because in 10 years time, you're going to have to explain to your kids why you were here and you didn't buy them any Bitcoin. And that often actually converts a few people to do it. The other thing, and I think I mentioned it earlier, that is the big converter, is getting people to think in Bitcoin rather than in dollars, right? And the way that I position it is, you have one Bitcoin, you are one of 21 million people that will ever have one Bitcoin, right? You have 10, you're one of 2.1 million people right? And this often helps people click as well. So the unit.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that explanation. I guess also for you personally, like what's your dream or vision for yourself personally? Like, you know, let's say your project becomes the leader, like in bringing institutional investors to bring in mainstream investors into the digital token and the Bitcoin space. Like, I guess for you personally, like where would you like to be in 5 years and 10 years? And for you personally, like what's your dream or vision to see in the world? Like, is it, you know, issues with inequity? Is it like the climate also? Is it financial education? Like, yeah.
I think the biggest problem that this world has now is inequality. I think this is going to break society in many countries. Obviously, we've seen what's happening in the US. It's scary to watch. And imagine, you know, being a hardworking person, bringing up a family in the US. I don't know if there are people on this call from the US, but it's a scary proposition. Like society is breaking over there. And thankfully, you know, the propagator of that is now out of office. But, you know, Trump wasn't really the problem. The problem was this inequality. And I think, you know, I've always been very focused on one particular thing, and that's homelessness. Like, I have people in my family who became serious drug addicts and just, you know, came from very good, balanced homes, loving family, and just through some bad choices ended up in a very horrible predicament. So I guess, you know, inequality is the big picture. You know, I would love to think of a way that we can focus on changing the way things are moving. And I do see Bitcoin as being that. You know, anyone can buy Bitcoin right here, right now. You can get it, and it's gonna keep growing as an asset. So I think that's, you know, that's why I'm such a preacher about it. I want more and more people to be involved. But from my own personal side, and the project that I know that I will be involved with at some point is just focus on homelessness. I think that life is about choices, and you make one bad decision, it can really break everything. And I think that's wrong. I think, and the way that our society is structured, you end up on the streets, you can't get a job because you don't have an address, you don't look good for the interview. You know, it's like it's this self-perpetuating downward spiral, and it's very hard to pull yourself out of. So I've always said that, you know, one of the reasons that I wanted to make a lot of money in finance was because that was something that I'm very passionate about. You know, I lived in central London, and it's very hard to reconcile the fact that you live in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, and there are people that have lived on the streets as, you know, 16 years old through to the age of 26. They've lived on the streets for 10 years. It's a ridiculous predicament that our society's in. And yeah, you know, I mean, I want to somehow focus on that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Richard, for sharing your insights and passions and thoughts. And yeah, super grateful for that. Yeah, looking forward to hearing more and seeing you and speaking more in the future. Thank you.
Well, look, thanks for the time. I really appreciated speaking to everyone. And Michael T. Dib, I think what you're doing is really great. You know, we need to think about education differently. So well done. Thanks very much.